Hi again, everybody. More of the post-American world from Fareed Zakaria. Now looking at Chapter 4, the Challenger. The Challenger, of course, is China. And let's get started. This is a long chapter, and I'm going to move quickly. He starts off, pages 87, telling us how Americans like things big. The Grand Canyon, and China, of course, is big, big, big. In the billions. And now he's going to give us a bit of history. He doesn't really fill it in for us, so let me fill it in for you. First of all, understand that Japan invaded China shortly before the beginning of World War II in 1937, and that the United States supported China throughout World War II, partly because the United States was an enemy of Japan, as was China, but partly because the United States saw that China would one day become a large, powerful, rich country. And that all went well until 1949, when the Chinese communists displaced the Chinese nationalists, and China went the way of the Soviet Union in following the edicts of Karl Marx and turning its back on capitalism. That ended in 1979, 78, 79, when Deng Xiaoping, shortly after the death of the leader Mao Zedong, creates or gives a speech in which he says, and this is on page 89, it doesn't matter if it's a black cat or a white cat, as long as it can catch mice, it's a good cat. In other words, doesn't matter how we do things, the important thing is to develop ourselves economically, to bring the Chinese people up out of poverty and out of the lives they've been living under the communists and long before. Okay. He's then going to tell us a bit more, 90, 91, 92, about the sheer size of China and the rapidity of its growth. This is something we've heard before, and he's filling it in for us in some more detail here. But really, on issue after issue, he concludes this section by saying, but issue after issue, it's become the second most important country in the world, adding a wholly new element to the international system. The first most important country, of course, is the United States. China is in second place. The next section, central planning that works. This begins on page 93. So the question is, does central planning work? And it seems to. And here he's going to contrast China's development, rapid though it's been, with the development of other countries, places like Chile and the Soviet Union. Those were countries where they similarly had non-market oriented countries, non-market oriented societies, and following the collapse of the Soviet Union in one case, or in other cases just changes in political regimes, they decided to adopt capitalism. And one way to do that was to very quickly and very rapidly turn their backs on state-owned enterprises, on the communist ideals, and just try to become market-oriented. And the biggest example of this is Russia, the former Soviet, the main country in the former Soviet Union. The strategy was what was called economic shock therapy. The problem was, and he says this right in the middle of page 94, he quotes a guy named Strobe Talbot saying it was too much shock and not enough therapy. In other words, it went pretty badly, and a lot of people suffered a lot. China's approach has been more incremental, has been slower, has been very much still state-controlled. But that brings up an interesting question. And Zakaria has an even more interesting answer. The question is, can a country become market-oriented, and can a country develop rapidly without becoming a democracy, without becoming a free, modern, Western-style democracy? And Zakaria doesn't think it can. He says, for example, that autocratic governments, governments like China had always been, like the Soviet Union, like others, don't survive this period of rapid economic growth. And he's going to go on, 97, 98, talking about China's rapid development, and yet its slow but steady approach to the problems of development. So again, Let me just see here. Political turmoil. That's fine. Oh, so now he says, but actually China's going to start to have some problems, and those problems are resulting from this continued dominance of the Communist Party, this continued effort at autocratic rule or non-democratic rule. And he says that on the one hand, India, and he'll tell us all about the problems in India coming up, but India has all kinds of problems, but its government doesn't lack legitimacy. It doesn't worry about protest or people being against the government. In contrast, he gives the example on page 100 of the Falun Gong, and maybe you've heard of this group before, but this is a kind of quasi-religious group. He describes them as members who gather together for breathing exercises. And the central government, the Chinese Communist government, has outlawed the Falun Gong, is really worried about the Falun Gong. So he's saying actually that China's going to start to have some problems with this. Okay? All right. Now, so big transformation, moving forward, but moving forward in its own way. The next section is called Hiding Its Light. And here he's talking about China is going to be a great power, like it or not, and that great powers, a change in the cast of characters in the world of great powers. In other words, the rise or fall of a great power has a profound effect on history and on the globe. And so no matter what, that's going to happen in China. And China's first effort has been to do what he calls hiding its light. And he quotes somebody saying that China knows how big it is. And so it's just going to move along very quietly and develop and become more economically and globally powerful, but not rock the boat, not upset anybody, not be too forceful in its rhetoric or too forceful in its military. And he concludes his section by saying that, in short, the path to power is through markets, not empires. This is page 108. And this is his argument for how China is going to approach its rise. It's going to approach it as something that follows from developing economically and not by going out and conquering the world. Okay. Next section, God and foreign policy. Now he just wants us to understand that, as he said before, the Chinese are Confucius, and Confucianism is different than Christianity. And Confucianism is even not religious in the same sense as the Abrahamic religions, that is Islam, Christianity, Judaism, that the Chinese are much more situational in their ethics. In other words, what's right and wrong changes depending on the situation, and not so rigid in their approach to things. So he says that's going to have an impact on the way China engages the world. It's going to be far more pragmatic. It's going to be far less interested in things that we might worry about, like human rights, for example. Okay, next section begins on 114, too big to hide. Here he's talking about the universalities of power. In other words, he's realizing, and he's saying that China is realizing and China is exercising its power. And it's doing so in lots of interesting ways. He talks about it on page 120 in terms of the Philippines. He talks about it in terms of Vietnam. He even talks about it in terms of the way it's engaging with Japan, its longtime enemy. And the section, of course, too big to hide, is saying that actually China's slowly getting comfortable with its growing power. Okay. All right. Finally, we have the section Dragon and Eagle, and I'm going to finish this up in 10 seconds or less. Well, 10 seconds or more. And the dragon, of course, is China. The eagle, of course, is the United States. And here he's saying that given China's rise, the United States has to confront it as a challenge. It's a powerful nation. And we are a powerful nation, and there's going to be a conflict there. But it's not going to be the same kind of conflict there has been in the past. It's not going to be a Cold War conflict. It's not going to be a military conflict. It's not going to be an ideological conflict. But it is still a conflict of power. Two countries that may want the same things. So there you go. Inside of 10 minutes, Bye bye.